everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of the $1 Million Ideas podcast. Ken and I have decided not to end the podcast just yet. What we're trying to do instead is, if you watch the last one, that we're going to be experimenting with a whole bunch of new formats. And in today's format, instead of the 4 usual ideas, what we're going to be doing is going deep on one. But one which is not something that we believe in, but something that we found online, and it has a very interesting backstory as well. So with that, hi Ken, how are you doing, and how are you feeling about testing out new formats?
Hey, I'm good. And about the new format, so I'm excited. I enjoyed the last format when we did 4 ideas, but it definitely felt like we didn't have enough time to go very deep and to call out some of the flaws and, some of the issues. And it kind of sometimes feels like, we just like every idea. So I like this, that we're going to really pick one apart, go deeper.
Yeah, same here. So let's set the stage. 2019, a company launches with an ambitious goal target called the browser company. The deal is that they said the world has changed, our browsers still look the same, they still operate the same way, and we need to change. And they've raised a whole bunch of money. So fast forwarding 2024, this company has raised $128 million and counting to achieve its vision. So when they launched in 2019, it takes them approximately 3 years. I think the first Arc browser, which maybe some of you on this podcast may be familiar with, launches. And I want to pause right there, Ken. What do you think about browsers, the idea? Do you think our browsers need changing, or they're just fine the way they are?
I think it's flawed still, right? I think if you look at your average user, it's one of the most disorganized experiences that you have on your computer still, because you probably, more than half of people, you open their browsers, it's just a mess of small little tabs and they forget where things are. So I think there's elements that are broken. But I also think that for me, the browser, at least on Chrome, has become part of a platform play in that I'm using my Gmail and I'm using other apps and I'm using extensions. So when you just, sometimes I'll bring out Safari or something, and when you lose those platform elements, that is a big loss that you need to trade off against this small little feature benefit. So that's kind of the lens that I view this.
Yeah, same here. In fact, what we'll do a bit differently, since we're doing things differently this time, is that I'll sort of show people the browser and generally sort of take it from there this time. Let me share my screen so everyone can see. All right. So this looks a bit weird because this is where we're recording, Ken and I using Riverside. So in Arc, what happens is you have this side panel, which are different sort of places in the browser that I can go. And I've set them up for different places, right? So in my personal tab, there are lots of news elements and work tab. And then this is where we are at. And so this is Arc, basically. What it does is that, it has lots of funky features. I can sort of open up my email over here. Command T doesn't open up a new tab, but it's sort of whatever you want to do, it can do, and you can do searches within it. And I've just grown to love this browser very, very much. But that's basically been my experience. And then I wrote this post, it's been 1.5 years ago, that, they had a whole bunch of things that they were running. And I basically was telling everyone that, hey, this is something that, people should test out. And so that's basically a brief primer. All of these things on the top are pin tabs, so I can go quickly to them. You have access to the entire extension store over here as well. So everything is just set up in a really nice sort of way over here. And I don't die of tab overload anymore. And so I'd love to get your thoughts, Ken, because I think that you're still using Chrome, right?
Yeah. I'm still using Chrome. It looks beneficial. And I experimented with Arc a long time ago, and I kind of like the idea. But for me, the other platform elements were just too important because I have different browsers open for different clients and things, and everyone's using Gmail and I'm using GDocs. And then the other thing is like I've gotten used to using the Google Groups where you have these group tabs. So that's how I'm set up. And I can see how what you're showing would improve certain elements. But for me, it's the trade-offs that I'm not willing to do.
I'm not going to push the ARC playbook because I think that they could sort of like tell you how you could solve several of those problems that you just mentioned. But I think by and large, what you just said triggered a video that they released 11 days ago. And in that video, the founder of the company goes and says, like, we're super proud of what we built and everything that we've done. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to hit mainstream just yet. And as a result of that, they're going to be pausing active development, sadly, on the Arc browser and going to be working on this new tool, which is going to be reimagining the way that we interact with the web. Ken, did you watch the video? Like, have any thoughts on what the founder said? Do you agree? Like, would you pivot as well?
Yeah. So I watched the video and he talked a lot about how he was skeptical of large language models, but now he loves them and they're going kind of all in with this new browser experience. And I agree with a lot of what he said. It's going to be hard to figure out, but I completely buy into believing that the browser, for me, the browser has been kind of on its own and then what I'm working on is separate, right? And the glue between is the human. And I think I totally buy into the fact that now the new browsers in a couple of years are going to interact directly with whatever you're doing, right? Like instead of watching a YouTube video on how to do something, I'm just going to like click a button on the browser. It's going to do it for me. So I buy into that vision a lot, right? But I don't think it's something he's just going to like pivot to on the first time.
I've defaulted to Perplexity now for a lot of my default searches at the moment. I haven't switched on the GPT search that they've enabled, but Perplexity gives me the search engine way, but the way that I get to Perplexity is still through a Chrome-based sort of like browser. So it really makes me wonder whether you build from the ground up, because if you build from the ground up, which is not what I think he alludes to, because I think he's going to build this new version within Chrome, if my bet is right, because then you won't lose all of your other stuff, but you will start to interact with him. And then how this new product is going to be different from Perplexity is something that I'm not too sure about.
That'll be interesting. When you build a competitor to Google and you want it to reside inside Chrome, I think Chrome's going to do everything it can to just like make your life miserable. Yeah, if it has traction. So that'll be interesting if he tries to do that.
Tangent away from like Arc for a while and sort of like bring the bootstrap company that we're going to be talking about into focus. So imagine this video comes out 11 days ago, and approximately like 3 days after the video, a very prominent bootstrap indie hacker, Peter Levels, sort of like sends out a tweet saying that, Arc has raised all of this money, they've burnt it all, and my friend is attacking the same problem with a company called the Horse Browser. And he just lit up the internet with that because millions of Arc users, including myself, are left thinking about like whatever happens to our browser. Now, you saw the tweet, right? Did it intrigue you? Or I guess because you're not an Arc user, wasn't that interesting? Or what were your initial thoughts?
No, even without being an Arc user, I found it interesting because I think the idea of doing threads does reflect how you typically browse. And so, seeing an organized view of how you browsed and then just going back to it and saving it and whatnot seems very interesting, right? It seems like a much better way. Like I often will bookmark or just copy and save URL links because I know that getting back to something interesting that I found 2 days ago is next to impossible. Like there's no good system for doing that currently in the browser, and it happens all the time. So I think conquering that was very interesting to me.
Cool. I think I'm going to give people a quick sort of like overview of this browser as well. So first off, we'll just talk about that and then let's go from there. So I'm going to share my screen again and we're going to go to the browser. All right. So welcome to the Horse browser. This is the browser. And it looks like there are a whole bunch of tabs open over here, which you can collapse and open and things like that. So we'll open up the website. And I think he has made a note over here specifically about the browser. So let's just try to search. So the first thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to hit all my shortcuts that I use on Arc, and it doesn't work. And so, wait. New browser, type link, browser, horse.browser. So here it is, browser.horse. So that's the URL. So as you can see, like I clicked that Google search, it opened this new thing. The first thing I noticed, at least on my PC, which is not a slow PC, is that generally loading speeds first time were not what I'm used to. I'm used to stuff opening a lot faster. And I don't know whether that was me or something, but it was definitely lagging. So it was like your Chrome browser is meant to keep you distracted. He has a nice sort of like page which says the key problem, which you also mentioned, which is that tab hell is the problem. And he organizes it with something called trails, which is basically this. And you'll see me sort of like use that in a bit. And basically this could be the screen sharing which is causing all of this lag also, because it wasn't lagging this bad when I was seeing it earlier. So when we click on resources or something over here, and we'll click on open startup as well. So when you find links and you click links, they basically open up as threads within the tab. So when you're on a website and you're clicking around, it sort of like automatically does it. So you'll see that it doesn't have any back button and things like that over there. And this is the entire browser. The big problem that I see straight away is that, we don't have the Chrome store. So I can't install any of my plugins that I need. I can't see any immediate sort of like shortcuts or power user stuff that Arc users are going to be comfortable with. But what I do see is a browser that functions pretty well and, gets the job done. Like if you don't want to be distracted, like, okay, I can see what he's saying. Like this is probably going to be a good one to do. And I think like once you have pages open, then they remain open. And when you close the browser or reopen the browser, everything stays the way. One last thing I'll show people is that there's this thing called area and folder. So area for people in Arc is like spaces. So let's say I call this like the workspace. And now everything under that will be there. And I'm assuming that I can move things into the space as well and things like that. So it goes into that space. And now you can see that it's embedded over there. We can also create folders, which is another Arc thing. This could be important links. And then you could put that into your workspace as well. And I think it works pretty well. He also has a note feature, which is what we saw. These are important notes. And then you can just sort of like just do that within the browser and keep tabs for yourself and things like that. And generally, I thought like the experience of using the browser, if I had never used Arc before, was pretty decent. But given that I have used Arc before, it felt like a very constrained version of the product. But I'm going to stop there before we move forward. Like you just saw this scan, like any thoughts, like seeing it and seeing the Arc demo earlier?
So my initial impression is it reminds me a lot of the way that I browsed 5 or 10 years ago, where I was very structured about my bookmarks. So on Chrome and back in the day, I think on Explorer, Like you could create folders and subfolders, and I went crazy with that. And I organized tons of what I browse into these. But then like it just became too hard to maintain, and it became too hard to find stuff because there were so many levels. And so this to me adds some additional value on top of that because of the threads, but I just don't feel like it's enough. And the other thing that it reminds me of, so I watch a ton of YouTube, and I go back to the history section like probably at least a couple times a week. And it has a pretty nice layout of everything that I watched, and it's organized by today, yesterday, last week, blah. And I go back there, and like it helps me because sometimes I want to remember what was I watching and try to find something. But it's not like it's twice a week, maybe. It's not enough to define how I want a product to be. And I have a feeling for a lot of users that's it's solving part of the pain point, okay, but there's other things that are important.
I used to do partially the bookmarking, especially below the link bar. You would have all those like folders, and then you would put stuff over there. I still remember those days of doing that. And yeah, you're right. Like you forget like where it is. One of the things I love about Arc is that you can just Command K and just search for stuff, and it just shows you where the link is open, and you don't need to sort of like do that. Look, it's not fair to compare Horse with Arc toe to toe because I think one company has raised $128 million, has over 100 people working on a browser. And over here, there's a solo dev going at it. But in the largest scheme of things, what Arc has discovered after spending $100+ million is that what you just said is the key insight, that not a lot of users are going to give as much preference or weight to all of those super features that I'm using. So if Arc came to me today and said, it's $100 to use the browser per year, I would probably pay. I think that's a small segment of the market, which is what I think Horse has sort of like landed into. And the only thing which upset me was the lack of Chrome Store and stuff integrations. But I mean, maybe I could get over that also. So it comes down to like the key question that we have in this podcast. Do we think like Horse makes $1 million a year in, he's been at it since 2022. Solo dev, bootstrapped all the way. He was not making that much money. I think like if you look at his open startup sort of like thing, I think he was on average probably making low thousand, somewhere like that, because it's basically $20 for a license and, $60 for lifetime sort of like key. So what do your gut tells you, Ken? Like $20 per year to use the browser, he needs to get 50,000 people to use this.
My gut tells me a lot depends on his retention curve. I have a feeling his retention curve, like there is no real retention curve because they just pay an annual fee. But I have a feeling it's pretty horrible. Like I have a feeling right now, a lot of people are dropping out because it's laggy or it doesn't do enough, whatnot. And so his ability to make $1 million is purely a function of like how many people like Peter Levels can he get to promote it, and how good of a marketer he is, and whether that marketing pays off. But I think it's about playing the long game. How do you build a product that people are really going to love longer term? And I don't think he's there yet. So that's how I view it. Like, do I think he can hack his way to $1 million and get people to pay? Yeah, maybe. But like, he's not there in terms of creating a product that people really love yet, at least from what I've seen.
As someone who downloaded it, paid for it for a year and stuff like that, am I sort of like, oh, I should start using this a lot more versus my Arc browser? I don't think so. But I think like his demographic of people who do research and a lot of other sort of like academic things who want this, and he could build features out for them potentially as a target market over there. Which brings us to an important point, is that I think that he should be further more opinionated about his browser and sort of like chunked down as far as user segments are concerned, right? I think what Arc has taught everyone is that browsing generally is well taken care of by the majors at the moment, which are Chrome, Safari, take your pick. Then there come like super users at some function, whether it's people like you or me who have either multiple companies or multiple clients that we're working with in different spaces and need to organize all of that. Then they're probably like academics and a lot of other people who have a lot of dense sort of like research that they need to reference quickly and organize, and, Chrome doesn't cut it. But if I was in his spot and I needed to get 50,000 people to pay me $20 a year, and like you said, keep on renewing year after year, I would probably make that group of people happy by really funneling. Because like if I come to him and I'm like, no, I need like Dashlane support because I don't have any sort of like passwords and stuff like that. They're all sort of like, whether I'm using Apple password key or something like that, how am I going to access my passwords? I can't go somewhere else, bring the password, copy paste them, and all of that stuff. So I think like that would be my advice to him. I do think though that if he does this, and with your influencer strategy, I think for sure a lot of people churn like myself. But I think for a specific segment that he can cater to, I do think that that's where you get your 50,000 users and start making $1 million a year.
Yeah, and when you were saying about how on Arc you just search and whatnot, like what you described almost exactly described how I used Evernote for years, and now I just use Apple Notes. But I have all these notes, I don't know where they are, but I know that I just search and it works and it's a great experience. And if you could bring that to the browser, which I guess Arc already is, maybe that's already taken, but that kind of clean, crisp experience that people are probably already experiencing on, if they were Evernote or other users, I think that's one interesting play. Like, hey, I'm going to give you the Evernote experience on browsing. And the other one, like completely going deep on an ICP is how I think you build a sustainable business. And one example I wanted to give, I would consider myself a niche user of Google Chrome in that I'm always putting 5 or 6 Google Chrome browsers on, and they all have groups and they all have Gmail and a lot of the stuff open. And I have to reboot my computer every day because there's this one system application called like Google Chrome Helper, and it consumes a lot of compute power. And like, I guess there's a few of them for every, there's one for every browser. And so it just slows everything down. And if someone solved that problem for me, like I would pay today because I'm so tired of rebooting my computer every day. But I think he just needs, like my example is just, he needs to go really understand some ICP, make sure that there's, a fair number of them, and then just make them love it.
Yeah. And I think like that's the strategy. He can clearly see like it took $100 million plus to get art to where it is. And I don't think that you need all of that money and things like that. But yes, they have built pretty decent products and I default to them on things, but they still haven't been able to build a business out of it, right? There's one thing, which is spend $100 million and build something cool, which a lot of people like, but very few people want to pay for. And I think like that's where bootstrapped entrepreneurs also do have an edge over here, because as soon as you raise venture capital, as we're seeing with Arc, you have to go for the bigger outcome. Like if they say we turn on monetization today on Arc and, out of the 1 million users that we have, like a small fraction of 5% of them are going to pay $100 a year. And then we'll start making $5 million a year in revenue or $10 million a year in revenue. Like, I don't think like that's probably going to be interesting enough for the capital that they raised, right? Like if you raise like, I think their last round was somewhere $700-ish million valuation plus. I think that's something that people really need to pay attention to, because I think by default, a lot of people think that they should raise money when it's not. Like the game completely changes, as you're seeing with Arc, and you leave a lot of people unhappy when you abandon projects.
Yeah, and I think Arc is a perfect example. It probably was a niche product with a niche audience. It's going to love it. And the size of that audience did not warrant the type of venture funding that they got. And therefore, they're at a crossroads. Like they've created this successful, great product, but in terms of the investors, it's probably a big fail. And that just shows you a different approach is needed sometimes.
Cool. So that's it. I don't think that we went as deep on horse today, but this was a fun episode. I think like it'll be interesting to get comments and feedback from everyone as to whether you enjoyed this. I think this was a unique sort of like episode in the sense that there was a new product that we spoke about, but it had to get a lot of context around where it was coming from. And I do think that we had some interesting insights about like growth and stuff like that at the end. But anything else that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off today on the browser or generally on the episode?
No, I just think that if someone's thinking about this space, you got to do something that's going to really change the game. And I think it's got to be related to AI. So that when I had to like think about what I learned from this, it's that I think AI is going to fundamentally change the browser space, but it's going to be hard. And you're going to have some deep pocketed competition.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about a browser, think again, because it's probably, like you said, not going to be easy. And it's probably going to take a lot of capital to get to where you are going, with a lot of competitors also coming at you. So yeah, with that, thank you very much. We're going to keep on experimenting over the course of the next couple of weeks. So you're going to see different varieties of episodes that are going to be released. And we're just going to be tracking as to how they do. So with that, if you like this episode, I would really appreciate it if you would like it and at least let us know. A comment would be awesome. And the ultimate sort of like thing would be a subscription to the channel. So with that, until next week, speak to you then. Take care, guys.